Welcome everyone. This is our last webinar this week for SEEE's week of webinars, and we're really pleased to welcome Naveen here today. He's going to be talking about how to make the best workplace, how to make it inclusive for all and to retain talent as well. If you're not a member of Social Enterprise East of England, I thoroughly recommend joining. It's a joint membership that we have with Social Enterprise UK. So you get access to lots of resources and advice and funding alerts. So you can have a look on our website for that. So I'll hand over to you, Naveen. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. So, I know it's lunchtime on Friday, but I have a bit of an idea, and let me know if you're okay with it. I was going to go through my content, and then after that, maybe just I want to say turn by turn, but it sounds like we're in school if I say that. But we go one by one. Hopefully, everyone's fine with that. And you can tell me a little bit about your business and what you think you might need help or advice with. And we can maybe just have a quick chat now if everyone has the time. I just think it'll be great to get everyone to interact and talk about the challenges they're facing, and then everyone can benefit from that. I will start by sharing my screen. And do let me know when you can see everything. Are you able to see everything? Okay, perfect. So now this is I wear many hats, but I am not an artist. But this is my social media banner image. So I had to put that up there. And as you can see, it's got lots of different people in it. Anyway, so a little bit about me. I have been working in human resources since 2012, 2013. Just saying that makes me realize that I do think we need to start calling it people and culture, because human resources is such an outdated term now. But yes, I've been working for the last 8 to 9 years in human resources. I've got experience working with large corporations, large retailers, startups, so people that are just building out their core team and don't have an HR function and don't have HR policies. So I've sort of been in the situation where I've been able to hit the ground running and set the tone in terms of their policies and processes. And I have done a lot of work with SMEs, so they're sort of in the middle, where they started out very small and now they're growing quite rapidly, so they're trying to catch up, and we're sort of going over all different policies and training with them. So it's great. I just love being able to do a little bit of everything with everyone. Some of the things I do, this is not an exhaustive list, but I deliver programs on unconscious bias training, and we will talk a bit more about unconscious bias later. I advise companies on how to enhance their workplace culture, how to keep the employees engaged, and I help analyze diversity and inclusion metrics. And what I do, how I do that primarily, is I examine the recruitment and hiring processes, because that really is the first step. Another interesting fact about me, I think, it's interesting anyway, is I co-founded Hirestance. And what Hirestance is, we're currently in beta. We launched a few months ago, but it is actually an idea that came to me during the very first lockdown. And what we do in a nutshell is we anonymize personal identifying data at the shortlisting stage. So as an employer, you would see profiles of candidates come in, and until you've arranged an interview, whether that's face-to-face or Zoom, so until you've arranged an interview and they've sort of accepted the invitation, you won't see their name or their address, and therefore you wouldn't be able to figure out what their gender is, or possibly what their ethnicity is. And the reason for that is, I'm hoping it's obvious. It's because we want to make sure people are just looking at the skills and the talent of their applicants, rather than looking at facts that can cause bias from that can cause bias in the employer and prevent them from moving a very skilled or very talented applicant to the next stage. So there are two things I'd like to talk about, two main themes I'd like to explore. One is, three, I'd say. revamping your hiring processes to make them truly inclusive, retaining and engaging your existing talent, and last, obviously, is asking for help. There are many sub-elements to creating an inclusive workplace, but we only have an hour, so I just want to talk about the main themes here. And in terms of, why I've put revamping your hiring processes is because that really is step one. So the stage where someone applies to you for a role, and you look at them, and you look at the application, and you have that interaction, whether it's to move them forward or whether it's to reject their candidacy, that is what I call the first date. It's the first impression of you as an employer, and what we really need to do is to make sure that everyone is receiving the same treatment at first stage. We need to make sure that we're responding to them, whether it's, I know it's a lot of work and people get very busy, but it is very important to respond, even if it's a no. First stage, again, this is tied very closely to my work, is it's very important to try and reduce the impact of unconscious bias. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase being thrown around. In a nutshell, unconscious bias is not a bad thing. Unconscious bias is not something that you should be ashamed of. Everyone has inherent biases, and that's a fact. And the first step to overcoming the negative impact of unconscious bias is to accept that everyone has inherent prejudices and inherent biases. It's what you do with them and how you work on them that's important. And it's also very, it's scientific. Human nature has always had a survival instinct. We've always been scared of what we don't know, or scared of what we haven't seen much of before. So it's very much something that's evolved with us as we've developed as a race. It's important to understand and accept that, a lot of people say, I'm not biased, I'm not prejudiced at all. And that's not necessarily true, but it doesn't make you a bad person. So the first stage is acceptance and knowing that you don't mean anything bad by it. You're just aware of it. Now, how you can mitigate the risk of unconscious bias in your hiring processes is these are quite simple steps that I think you can, it's very easy to implement. If you don't have, the technical bandwidth of using a system like Hirestance, although ours is very simple, or you don't have, fancy software, what you can very easily do is print out CVs and blank out personal details, and then pass it to the person in charge of hiring that candidate. That's sort of just allowing them to look at the skills and the talent rather than, where's this person from? Will they be able to speak English properly? It sounds really strange that people would say that, but I have seen that so much that I just have to mention that's very basic, and it's something that I've heard a lot. Another example, this is a personal example of mine. When I first moved to London from Canada, we lived somewhere else, and then we moved to Richmond, which is a relatively affluent neighborhood. And the number of job applications I sent were the same. The frequency, the types of companies, all the same. But as soon as I moved to Richmond, and as soon as I put that on my CV, I probably got 5 calls for an interview in the first week, which is, it's London. There's so many applicants, but I think it was my address because that was the only thing that changed. So again, blanking out the address, I do think is a good idea, because believe it or not, people do discriminate based on where you live. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is having, I wouldn't say panel interviews, because that's probably for very large corporations, but you could have more than one person at each stage of the interview. So let's say you have 3 interview stages. The first is a phone screen. The second stage is with a hiring manager. It's best to have someone who would be a peer or a colleague of the candidate, not necessarily in the same department, but someone who would work closely with them. So let's say if you're hiring for marketing, someone in the sales team or someone in the supply chain team, if you're a retailer, could interview with your hiring manager. And then the third and final stage would probably be senior management, someone from senior management or the CEO or founder of the company. And then again, it should be with another manager from a different team who would be completely neutral. And yeah, the reason I mentioned this is it seems like a lot of work. It seems like asking, a lot of people to commit their time, but it is important. And I'll give you a real life example from my work where in the past, where I've had a hiring manager look at the CV of a candidate and say, and interview them and then say, I don't know if I should progress her to the next stage because she's just come back from a career break from looking after her family. If she needs to put in long hours, how do I know she's going to be willing to do it? How do I know she's not going to be rushing home at 4:45 p.m.? These are word for word what the hiring manager said to me. These are her words, and it's interesting because that person is also someone with a family, but she's brought in that bias into the recruitment process. And I advised her and I said, you're making assumptions on information you don't have because you don't know what this person's childcare arrangements are. You don't know, you don't know if she can take the work home and work once the child's asleep. You don't even know if it's going to be an issue, but you're making these assumptions, which I think is unfair, especially considering you think the candidate is qualified in all other areas. So what you can quantify is what you should focus on. Does this person have the requirements? Does this person have the skills? Does this person seem to have the personality that would fit into the role? It's very dangerous when you start making assumptions on things that you don't know much about and things that you shouldn't really be asking about because they shouldn't impact the role. The assumption is that she applied to the role and she wants to do the job. Is she qualified? That's all you need to know. And the second part of this, which I found interesting, was there was another manager, not directly going to be managing the candidate, but he was in the interview too. And him being a man, he said, yeah, I fully agree. She's qualified. We need this person. Let's move ahead with the application. And in the end, she was hired and she was amazing. She was the perfect person for the role. So that just shows you how just having more than one viewpoint can help a situation, because we could have lost out on a really good candidate just because of an unfair and conscious bias, I think. So just make sure there are different people interviewing the person. The second thing is to widen your recruitment net. It's often very easy to just say, I'll ask my friends for lead, I'll ask people in my network, which is a very easy way of getting people that you could, that they'll come highly recommended. You'll know about them, you'll possibly have heard their name before. But, more than likely, they're going to have this very same ideas as you. They're going to have the same mindset as you. And now this isn't a bad thing, but as an organization, you might be wanting to change and grow and evolve. And the only way to do that is to get out of your comfort zone. So what I usually advise people to do is to, reach out to professional networks, reach out to universities that have alumni groups. So if you're looking for, a finance person with a specific skill set that is hard to find out if they have, for example, a women's professional network in that area, or, someone who, like a Surrey professional networks, if you're looking at a geographical area, and you're quite likely to find some very good candidates that way, rather than just, posting on LinkedIn and hoping that everybody just comes to you. Do that though. Make sure you post everywhere that's visible and that's that you can reach out to, but make sure you're doing out of the box work when it comes to this as well. Another example is when I worked for Swissport, a large corporation. They were also just applying, just putting jobs up on job boards, but the roles they were looking for were very, localized. They needed people from specific geographical areas. So I advised them to, people don't use print anymore, but in this case, it was good, where they printed out the job and they sort of did a bit of employer branding and they put that in the local council job search office, or they put that in local print newspapers. And that actually, again, you're widening your pool. It sounds like work, but it's work that's worth doing is my take on it. And the third thing about, third issue I'd say I've run into is that There's this mindset around, oh, if if we're hiring from an underrepresented group, we're doing someone a favor, or, we're making a concession, or there's a quota system we have to fill. So we need X number of women, we need X number of, Indian people, we need X number of people who have mobility issues. But don't do it just for the sake of doing it. Don't do it for the optics. You're not doing, this isn't charity. Because a lot of people, to be blunt, a lot of people do think, okay, you know what, if we're doing this, we're doing a good thing. You are doing a good thing because you're hiring someone who has the skills and talent, and they will bring in some value to your organization. So it's very important to help change that mindset. And every time you hear that with a hiring manager, just to reinforce that no, they are giving us something. Yes, we're giving them a job, but they are bringing so much value to us with their experiences. And that is not just professional experience, also life experience, which is equally important, I think. And then the next thing is, once you have the talent that you want and the talent that you need to grow your organization, you need to make sure they stay with you, and you need to make sure that they're happy with you. So the first, as I mentioned, the first date is the application process. And the next stage in your relationship is to have a robust induction and onboarding process for your new employees. There's some very little things that might seem like they're not important or not a big deal, or, these things just happen, but they show your employee how important they are to you. So another example is, an example of this is not having the laptop programmed in time for their first day, just because you didn't have the time, or just because the IT department was busy, or they were on vacation, or whatever the reason is. Just think about it. If you're showing up on the first day and you don't have a laptop set up, you don't have your, work pass sorted out, the people you want to work with, or the people you're going to be working with, are all in meetings, and you're just at your desk waiting for 2 hours. Wouldn't that make you feel, it's your first day? Shouldn't you be welcomed in? Shouldn't you be involved from day one? So a lot of smaller companies do make that mistake of not planning properly, which is why sometimes they need, it's good that they're starting to build HR policies, HR processes, bringing an HR department in, because they can start doing all of that and creating those processes for them. Now, another thing is, when you're hiring a group of people, or for example, for a specific role, you've hired 3 or 4 people, you need to make sure they're all having the same exposure to senior management. They're all having the same opportunities to network. You can't play favorites from first day. A lot of companies unconsciously do this. A lot of hiring managers unconsciously do this, but you have to remember, just because you gel with someone, that person isn't any more deserving than the rest of the new members of your team. They all have to be given the same opportunities. And then, companies need to invest the time and the money in their people. They need to think about, building a pipeline of talent within the company. What I find is, a lot of times, you'll have someone in a role who will be there for 5 years or 6 years, and they won't have progressed because the company just hasn't given them that opportunity. So they go somewhere else. And then as soon as they've gone, the company looks at the needs of the business, since there's that vacancy now, and says, oh, you know what, we need a senior person to come in actually and do a bit more of this, plus what this person was already doing. And then you get an external hire and you pay them like 20 grand more. And this is more common than you think. But really, you should have been doing all that planning all that while. And that person who was with you for 5 to 6 years is now a lost resource. And, you've lost someone who was valuable, who was liked, who was loyal to the company. So, I do find it funny that people are reluctant to pay more to the talent that is already there, and would rather hire someone externally at a higher salary, if that makes sense. Another thing I hear of, management is reluctant to give the spotlight or share the spotlight with members of their team during, board meetings, or during, let's say, when you have those monthly meetings where you're going over numbers and going over KPIs. A good leader knows that they can and they should be replaceable. And, as a leader and as a manager, you need a specific set of skills with your business, but you also need people skills and leadership skills. And putting your team in front and giving them the credit where it's due is part of that. And that, again, it sort of fosters employee engagement, and it helps the workplace culture, because the more, as an employer, the more you give to an employee. And when I say give, I don't mean in terms of material, although obviously good compensation is key. The more you give in terms of career opportunities, in terms of appreciation, even if it's just, a thank you for your hard work. Melissa did a great job last week when we were all working long hours. She helped deliver, just saying these things often is so helpful to you as a team leader and to the organization. And then I think the last major factor in terms of engaging your talent is making documentation and cross-training in your team a priority. Too often I've seen, there are people who have been, again, with the company, going back to the example I used before, someone in the company for 5 to 6 years, they know all their documents, they know all their procedures by heart, they're excellent at what they do, they just haven't taken the time or been given the time to, document and put down, what goes where and how XYZ has to be done, because it's all in their head and it's all natural to them. But once that person leaves, a wealth of knowledge leaves with them, and you have to start from scratch. And again, a lot of time is wasted, a lot of resources are wasted, a lot of mistakes are made. So I think it's very important to make that time, whether it's booking 30 minutes in a week, where everyone sort of has a huddle and just takes bits and pieces from each other and works on them. I think the enemy is the saying, I don't have the time. You have to make the time, because when you step back and when you work on the business and on the system and you invest that time in, it makes your processes and working in the system and putting out fires a lot more easier and a lot more sustainable in the long run. So if there's any advice I can give you after working with quite a few SMEs and startups, it's please document, please cross-train your people. And then, the last bit of the advice I want to give you today is to ask for help. When you're a smaller company, or when you haven't done this before, or when there's a new issue that's arisen and you have to work on it, yes, you need to make sure you hold yourself up to a high standard. You need to make sure you're delivering on your promises. But if you try to do too much all at once, you will fail. And then, you'll go back to the drawing board and you'll possibly give up. So, just measure the work that you're doing and be realistic about the goals that you want. Ask for help from colleagues in your industry. So people who are sort of, let's say their companies are maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of you in the process with what they're doing. Excuse me. Ask them how they did it. Ask them what the pitfalls were. Ask them what to avoid. And, if they're colleagues and then in a different company in the same industry, more than likely they'll have some excellent tips for you. If you have one HR manager or one or just a small team of HR and compliance, which is very common in smaller companies, they can't do everything. And again, putting everything onto their plate is setting them up for failure. It is worth getting an outside consultant for a short period of time to help you with specific projects. And again, this doesn't have to be HR related. It could be for anything. It could be for implementing a new accounting system. Your finance team might be snowed under already. Maybe you need an external consultant who is an expert in that specific software to just train up your team for a few weeks. And then last but not least, you need to ask your employees if the changes you're thinking of making are what they want and what they need. Excuse me. Because obviously, if you make all these changes, but you haven't been taking feedback, it's, again, it's a lot of work and effort that's wasted, and no one's going to avail the opportunities you're presenting them. So a good way is to just, obviously informally have that kind of relationship with your staff, where they're telling you what they need, where they're telling you what they want. For example, I've had staff come to me and say, I think we really need to make sure we block off an hour in the day, make sure there can be no calls. Of course, I'm going to have a coughing fit now. Make sure there can be no calls during that hour, so that people get a lunch break.
Lucy was about to say something.
I was just going to say, that comment about making sure everything's ready for them on their first day, making sure their laptop's there, their mobile phone, it's so important. And I think that, my organisation, I I don't think other people realise. So like the IT department, I don't think they realise the impact that that would have on an individual if that wasn't there. And that constant chasing, well, they start next week, they start, you know, when you've got a couple more days, are you ready? And you know, it's so often things aren't ready for people on their first day, and it doesn't set the right impression from the beginning, does it?
Yeah, and it's sort of like, you know, when you wake up late and then you're chasing the rest of the day. Because the thing is, it's happened to me where I've just sat around for 2 days because my laptop wasn't programmed. And it's sort of like, do they even care about me? Should I just go home and take a nap? Do you know what I mean? So, but yeah, I think, you know, they're little things, but they're very important. So, you know, back to what I was saying, just, you know, you need to make sure that your employees are in favor of the changes that you're making. And one way to measure this is obviously just through informal, you know, when people are telling you what they want and what they don't need. I think before I went off on my little fit there, someone at a place I worked mentioned that it would be nice to have an hour each day blocked off for lunch. So, you know, obviously barring external stakeholders, people internally shouldn't call each other between 12 to 1 or 1 to 2, for example, just to make sure everyone is getting a break. And I thought, you know what, this is something that's so easy to implement. Why haven't we been doing it? And you know, it was great. It just sort of showed people that, you know, management cares. They do want us to take a break. So that sort of prevented, you know, line managers calling their employees randomly at 1 p.m. They waited till 2 or till 3, because these things can wait usually. Another way is, you know, to actually measure the results of the work you're doing by sending out anonymous surveys. Don't make them too long. You can make 3-question surveys, which will take a few seconds. And that's sort of, you know, it tells you if what you're doing is working. It's also very important to remember that this isn't something that you can just check off a list and it's just done forever. It's as important as, you know, when you start a business and you have processes, and then, you know, you do need to keep evolving them. You do need to keep changing things. You need to keep, you know, for example, if you're developing a product, you will add more products to the product line. It's not just that one thing you're going to sell forever. So similarly, inclusion in the workplace isn't something that's just, you know, done once and that's it. It's constant. You need to keep adding elements to it. So, sorry. So it should be prioritized along with your other business goals. I think I am struggling. So Jane, if you don't mind reading the last bit for me.
Not at all, it's absolutely fine. So yeah, so your last point there was just about making sure everyone's involved. And we've got some resources here, which I'm sure you've heard of, certainly ACAS, we may have heard about. I've not heard of askamanager.org. That sounds interesting. I imagine there's that just like a peer-to-peer, like HR managers and such, like sharing information.
It's just it's a really good blog site where she has questions coming in. For example, my manager said this to me and I reacted XYZ. Was this the right way to react? And then she'll just give advice. And it's really good.
That sounds really good. Yeah, because I'm a freelance consultant, so I'm on a few like freelance groups, and being a freelancer can be very lonely sometimes, because obviously you deal with the clients, but not necessarily, you know, they're not necessarily want to hear how your day's gone or whatever. It depends on the client. And that kind of feedback within, you know, your sort of sphere is really good. Like, you know, this happened, was I right to say this? Or, you know, just someone to share, isn't it? Especially if you are a small team on your own or whatever.
And some of the questions are really funny. Some of the questions that come in. So it's really good lunchtime reading as well for me. So
I can imagine. So has anyone got any particular questions or anything you want to share? You know, you don't have to, obviously this is a safe space, as they say. You don't have to mention any names if you wanted to share, you know, a case study or previous employer. Has anyone got any questions? No? Louise? Oh, hi, Louise.
Hi. Sorry. I had my camera off and got no makeup on. I never normally. Will you cut this bit out of the recording? Just to introduce, so I'm from Hertfordshire Community Foundation. We do some work with SEE.
You do, yes.
And there's two sort of parts to why I'm here. One is just internally. I joined the team a couple of years ago, and we have staff within the organisation, but we also use a big pool of trainers. And I'm trying to, I guess that would be my kind of workforce as well, if we're thinking of it that way. So do you have any tips on recruiting trainers in particular as a trainer? Or, you know, I'm finding it hard to sort of find a more diverse pool of trainers. And then the second part of why I'm here as well is we do trustee training, and we do trustee training for boards across social enterprises, charities, community groups. And we've been doing a lot around unconscious bias and being more diverse and inclusive. But I guess the next stage is that we've had feedback around, okay, there's part one is the recruiting, but similar to what you said about once they join, how can we make sure that organizations are actually ready for that, so that there isn't such a high turnover of people coming into boards or the workplace and not feeling really included, or that the environment is inclusive enough to stay there and keep them there. So I guess any advice on both of those things would be really great.
Sure. So in terms of the trainers, if I could just ask, what is the specific skill set that you're looking for?
We do workforce development for organizations. So it can be from anything from fundraising to board training to leadership or digital. So it's such a wide area, but because we have a kind of local focus, we try and recruit locally. So it's often done by who you know, or who it is very much done that way. And I want to start looking at doing it a little bit differently, but I'm not really sure exactly how to go, because with trainers it's a little bit different in terms of they don't often go through the same recruitment organizations or routes.
Right. And they're mostly going to be freelance, I imagine.
Yeah, so I'm finding it harder to sort of reach unless it is true personal connection, and then we're going the same way we always go.
So do you use job boards like LinkedIn, Indeed, for example?
I'm on LinkedIn. I do go through LinkedIn, but I don't go through Reed, except I didn't know if it was worth it. If do you think it would be?
Gosh, I'm really struggling. I'm sorry.
I'm really sorry. I don't want to ask
No. I shouldn't be. I don't know why this has come upon me. But anyway, if you guys don't mind the coughing, I'm just going to continue talking. But I think, like you said, so for example, if you're looking for someone with, expertise in fundraising, you can try and look for nonprofit, nonprofit professional membership organizations, or you can look for there are recruitment organizations that are just for the charity sector. So just, again, it's specialized. So if you're looking for, let's say, 2 people who are, who can help with events, there is, just as an example, there's a school called the Event Academy, and they'll have, a list of people you can potentially contact as alumni. So just make sure, like the CIPD is the HR professional body. And if you're looking for someone HR, and this is just another way of doing it, just, contacting them and saying, I'm looking for XYZ. Do you have a job board? A lot of these places will also have their own job boards. So there is that. So just, just look at the specific role you're recruiting for, and then look at any local professional networks that are connected to that function and reach out to them, I'd say. And then another way is just also, LinkedIn. I know you're putting the job ads up, but actually searching, getting a premium membership and searching people in those roles and looking at their experience.
Yeah, because I just have a normal membership. So yeah, it might be worth doing that. Yeah.
A couple of other suggestions, Louise. I mean, again, it depends which trainings you're looking for, but obviously bearing in mind the presentation, you have to bear in mind this is the local network, but Social Enterprise UK have a jobs board. There's IPSE, which is like the professional body for self-employed people. They have like a directory. And there's also one I personally use is charity jobs. So I actually look for client work on charity job, because they're not just charities, there are all sorts of things on there. Really, really diverse organisations on there.
Sorry, there was another element, wasn't there, Louise, with the board, with the training for the trustees?
Yeah, I guess around just making sure.
Yeah, so you know, a very simple tip I give people is, you know, when someone's new to the organization, let's say if it's me, an Asian woman who's joined an organization with primarily white males on the board, and I'm the newest board member. You need to sort of look at, you know, who is the most enthusiastic about me joining. Out of, let's say, like all 5 men for some reason were not, but there's one that's like maybe lukewarm. So appoint them unofficially to kind of be my mentor. And then what I find is that, you know, in meetings with senior management, and particularly, like you said, board meetings, people will talk over me, especially if I'm new. So a good tip I would give is to, you know, the person that you've appointed, or it could be you as well who's helping out, but it could be you or the person you've appointed, could be like, you know, Naveen was trying to say something. Naveen, sorry, what were you saying? You know, if I get interrupted. And just even if it's a Zoom meeting, and you notice that person needs to be, you know, in tune with me, in tune with what I'm trying to say for the first few months. And then that's sort of like helping them, right? You're giving me a helping hand, and you know, it's part of my induction into the culture. And it's part of getting people to get to know me by giving me that voice and that opportunity.
Thanks, Naveen. That was really useful. Any other questions anyone wants to share, or scenarios you've struggled with? I've got one, Naveen. I think I mentioned to you. So we've at SEEE, which is a social enterprise itself, we need to recruit some more directors. So we've just recently sort of drafted a job spec, and we're about to start circulating it. So this is really relevant to work out where we advertise it. The problem we've got is that all the directors have got, you know, full-time jobs. They do this voluntary, so they're busy. So we've got to quickly help them, you know, say, yes, this person looks a potential good new director. But equally, I'm conscious of, we also need to avoid unconscious bias. And, you know, I'd be the person receiving the applications.
Yeah.
So, you know, what kind of things could we do to kind of make sure I don't have the unconscious bias, but equally I can pass it on to the directors to review them so they can review it easily?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, like I mentioned, there are systems, and I'm not trying to, you know, impose Hirestance on you, but if there was a system where you could just sort of, you know, people would apply and then it would automatically blank that out. But given that you don't have that, the best thing you can do is, like I said, it is manual. You print it out and you just blank right away. And then, or is there, you know, if you have an assistant who's not involved in the hiring process at all, can do that for you and pass it on to you. So he or she doesn't need to look at the CVs and, you know, see, oh, should I pass this on to Jane? They just need to blank that out and give it to you. And you can then pass it on to the directors. And I'd say pass all of the CVs on.
Yes,
I know.
no, definitely.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be involved in decision making, so I'd be like the messenger, really. I suppose electronically you could redact information and save it in a shared Google Drive or something, that type of thing.
And then also, you know, I mean, if you are shortlisting, that's fine, but just you can shortlist just based on the skills and then pass it on to the directors, because as you mentioned, they're busy. I realized if you give them 50 CVs, they might get very upset. So yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Any other questions, man? Or was there something else in chat? Let me have a look. Oh, sorry, it's Louise explaining what you're doing. Thanks, Louise. Any other questions anyone would like to ask?
No? Okay. Well, I am gonna just quickly, this is my contact information here. So do feel free to pop me an email. I'm happy to help. You'll be confused because LinkedIn has my maiden name, or as I like to call it, my family name. Twitter has my married name. But I'm the same person here. And I'm going to go off on a tangent and say, people call me Mrs. Akhund all the time, which really upsets me because that's my mom. And it's, I just wish people would say Ms. more often when they're not sure. Anyway, so I felt like I had to make that point. But anyway, you know where to contact me if you look here. I am also offering 30 minutes free consultation to anyone who's attended this webinar, or anyone who's a member. Just obviously just let me know that you were on the webinar. And we can just sort of go over, like for example, Louise mentioned that she has a few questions, and then I could look at them in more detail. And we could, I'm happy to spend 30 minutes with you. And then over here, at the very top, I've mentioned, so this is, it's for everyone, not just people who've attended the webinar, but we do one active job posting at a time for free on Hirestance because we're in beta, and because, we'd love the feedback from people who join our platform. So if you do need to post a job, please let me know. I'll help you do it for free.
Wonderful. Thanks, Naveen, so much for giving up your time. It's been really, really interesting.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry again for the coughing. Jane, are you sure there's no way you can edit that out?
I can, don't worry. I said I've got my very handy freelancer colleague who's editing.
Oh, cool.
These.
Okay.
So I will tell her to spot the coughs. And
I was going to go cry in a corner, but I'm happy now. But yeah, it was wonderful. It was really great talking to everyone, and thank you for your questions, and thank you for, listening.